Right?
Hi, everyone. Sorry, my internet dropped me here at the office. Good morning again. Have we got anybody else that joined us? Nope. Okay, good. Well, then Sarah and Tammy knew that I was here and then gone. All right. Hopefully I will stay connected. Can everybody see me? No, am I frozen again?
Do you think we should get started?
Yes. Can you all hear me?
Yep, we got you now. You're
I'm
back.
having some internet challenges. Oh, it says my internet connection is unstable. I will do a very quick intro then, just so everyone knows we are recording this session. I believe it will keep recording, but Carly, if you don't mind pressing record on your computer as well, I think it will let you do that. Hopefully. Can you hear me, Carly?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. If you can try to record on your end too, just in case the internet is on the fritz again here. All right, so welcome so much. We are so glad that you're making time out of your day to join us. Today is World Suicide Prevention Day, so thank you for joining us for this important webinar. First, I wanted to tell you a little bit about Peace River Center, for those who may not know or may not know all of the services that we provide. So we are your community behavioral health center. We have an array of mental health services, outpatient that we're currently providing via telehealth. We do integrated health care at our wellness clinic. We also have 2 inpatient crisis stabilization units. We do a mobile crisis response team, which Kirk is actually in charge of, and he can tell you more details about that, but that's a great community resource to be aware of. We offer substance use disorder programs. We have 2 domestic violence shelters and lots of victim services, including in a sexual assault recovery program. We operate a short-term residential center, 2 group homes, and an array of mental health recovery programs. This month, in addition to being National Suicide Prevention Month, is also Recovery Month. So I encourage you to check out our social media channels. We actually have a virtual marathon going on right now. So if you're a runner or a walker like me, check that out. We serve over 22,000 individuals every single year, and we are in Polk, Highlands, and Hardy counties. So again, I wanted to mention this session is being recorded and will be available on our social media channels. Everyone will remain muted, and we encourage you to use the Q&A for chat and raise your hand if you need more discussion or need Kirk to clarify anything. So speaking of Kirk, he is an incredibly talented and very, has tons of certifications. After his name, he can tell you more about them, but he is the Director of Crisis Response Services and Professional Development for Peace River Center. He's been with the River for over 20 years and was responsible for creating the Mobile Crisis Response Team. Kirk has over 30 years of various mental health and psychiatric emergency healthcare experience. He holds a master's degree in social work from Rutgers University in New Jersey and a bachelor's degree in psychology. He is a licensed clinical social worker in Florida. He is also trained in he is a trained crisis hostage negotiator and a certified field traumatologist. And that is just his short bio. We have his extended bio on our website if you'd like to check out all of his incredible certifications and everything he's done. So Kirk, I will now turn it over to you if you want to share your screen.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Jessica. And I just want to say before I do turn it over, welcome everybody. I'm glad everyone's here and grateful that you're taking this time to learn a little bit of something regarding suicide awareness. This talk today is just the tip of the iceberg with regard to the issue of suicide. It's a very complex issue, and it's one that we don't talk about very often, but it's something that we as a larger community need to be much more aware of and working towards destigmatizing somebody talking about that particular issue. So again, I appreciate you all taking your morning out to come hear me speak on the issue of suicide. Now, this topic is going to be a very broad presentation on the issue of suicide. It is suicide awareness. And get to the slide presentation portion here. All right. I think we are all set there.
Oh, something happened on my view. It's showing the next slide in the notes.
Okay. That better?
And if our attendees wouldn't mind commenting to let us know if the view is good on your end, it might just be my computer since I've had some challenges this morning.
Okay, can you just see the slide now, Jessica?
It was like a small portion of the slide.
Oh. Let me just stop sharing and try again.
There you go. If at first you don't succeed, try it again. Sarah, or Tammy, were you all able to see the slides properly, or if, when he pulls it back up, if you'll let us know?
How's that?
Perfection.
All right. All right. Again, we're here to talk in general terms with regard to suicide awareness. There's much more information out there regarding the issue of suicide and what's going on. Let's see. So let's get into what we're here to learn today. We're getting into becoming a little more familiar with some of the more recent statistics, and there's a whole issue around the statistics that I'll get into when I get there. Looking at some of the myths and getting into those warning signs. That's going to be the key part of what you get out of today, is understanding there are warning signs and then what to do about it. So those are the four major objectives for our presentation today. So now we're going to get into some statistics. And one of the first ones, well, let me back up. First of all, the first statistic, you need to understand something about statistics, especially when it comes to the issue of suicide. These are statistics from 2018. And you're probably thinking, Mr. Kurtz, this is 2020. Why don't we have the more recent stuff? This actually came out in February 2020. These the data sheet on the vital statistics with regard to suicide. It takes some time for folks to pull out the information with regard to suicide and the numbers. Because there is such a large stigma, there's sometimes the issue is hidden within the vital statistics on death. And it's so powerful that even in some parts of our own country, the medical examiners are still reluctant to check the box, if you will, on the death certificate that someone had died by suicide. So these are from 2018. And even with these numbers, I want to say that they are rather conservative in my opinion. So that means they're probably more than what is actually reported. So, but these are the numbers that have been trending for many years, or I have been trending for many years, and the way it's been collected has been fairly consistent. So 2018, we had 48,344 individuals die by suicide in our country. It's the 10th leading cause of death for all Americans. It beats out things like Parkinson's disease, renal failure, and even homicide. So it's the 10th leading cause of death for all Americans. And speaking of homicide, for every homicide, there are 2 deaths by suicide. So what hits the news? The homicides. And so if you watch the news tonight and you hear of somebody who has been killed by somebody, multiply that times 2, and that's how many people have taken their own life in the same period. It is the 2nd leading cause of death for our young people. And we define young people here as age 15 to 24. The 2nd leading cause of death. And actually, this has been something that for the last 5 years has been the case. Before that, it was traffic accidents are number 1. 2nd was homicide, and suicide was 3rd. But more recently, it has shifted over into becoming the second leading cause of death for our young people. Very disturbing trend indeed. Okay, every 11 minutes, somebody is dying by their own hand. So as we give this talk here and get through it, there will be approximately 4 or 5 people that will have taken their own life by the time I'm done. So every 11 minutes. Okay. Men are 3 times more likely than women to die by suicide. And so why is that? Well, think about this for a minute. Men choose more lethal means than women. Men take out the firearm and will utilize that, whereas women choose not to use that methodology. They tend to choose poisoning and strangulation as their means to end their life. Part of that has to do with, based on some of the research that's out there, has to do with the fact that we don't want to leave a mess after somebody has died by suicide. We want to look nice in our death. However, this trend is changing. We're noticing in more recent years, women are starting to use more lethal means. So remember I said every 11 minutes somebody is dying by suicide. Well, in that same amount of time, for every death by suicide, there are 25 attempts. So I said 4 or 5 individuals will die. That means 125 individuals in the same amount of time will have attempted to take their life. Based on the data, there's approximately 50 individuals, 50% of those individuals who die by suicide have utilized a firearm in taking their life. Now, I like to say this trend over the last couple of decades, this actually has gone downward, and it's kind of plateaued right here at about 50% right now. So when we talk about rates of suicide, there's a statistical formula that gets put together, and we compare each of the states. If we don't use that statistical formula, it is a little bit difficult to compare a state of Rhode Island to the state of Texas. The size is huge, the population size is different as well. So we use a statistical formula to kind of level the playing field out. And what you end up getting is a rate of deaths by suicide. So for us here in Florida, we rank 24th in the nation. 24th in the nation. So anybody who care to take some guesses as to what the 1, 2, 3, and 4 numbers are? Well, here they are. 1 is New Mexico. 2, Wyoming. Number 3, Alaska. 4, Montana. And 5, Idaho. Those are the top 5 states in our nation. Now, typically people will say, oh, it's New York, it's New Jersey, and actually they are in the bottom 5, with New Jersey being actually 50, 49 New York, 48 Rhode Island, 47 Massachusetts, and 46 Maryland. So these states have a lot of things in common when you look at them. The top 5 states tend to be very isolative, and they have a widely dispersed population. So what's important to understand here is some research that was done a century ago by a sociologist by the name of Emil Durkheim. He helped champion sociology as a course of study. So Emil Durkheim did a study to show that suicide is not necessarily a private issue. It is a social issue. And he published his research in a book called Suicide. So you can only imagine suicide sociology students walking around campus with a book that large letters that says suicide would raise some concerns. But the issues that he discovered in his research, again, over a century ago, still hold true today. And one of those findings was the fact that social isolation tends to increase rates of suicide. So when we look at this, the top 5 states, they're very sparse states, populations, or in wide areas. And so that becomes a big issue. And it comes into play later on when I get into protective factors. So one, what is the one all about? Well, one means one voice, one person. You don't need the alphabet soup after your name in order to prevent somebody's death by suicide. All you need to do is understand some of the warning signs and be willing to talk about the issue in a non-confrontational, non-judgmental manner so that the person opens up and talks about their issue. But very often we're afraid to approach the issue, or people are afraid to talk about the issue because there are several myths out there. And a lot of these myths are very strong and hold fast in our community and have sunk in, and it helps to prevent us from talking about the issue. So we're going to take a look at some of these myths right now. All right, so fact or fiction. Talking about suicide puts the idea in somebody's head. Well, actually it does not. What the research is showing us is no, the opposite is true. It gets the person to open up and talk about the issue. Excuse me. So asking the question, the person feels more relief. They feel like their secret is out, and therefore they're able to, talk with the individual who broached the topic of that. So no, if you have the spidey senses going off saying, hey, something's not right here, ask the question. Ask the question. It will actually go a long way to connect you with the person that you love and care about. Okay, suicide happens with some warning. Well, this is actually fact. What we know in our research is that approximately 80% of those individuals gave some definite clues to their intention. And about 30% showed signs of depression during the 3 months prior. And in the older population, what we have found is many had gone to their primary care physician the month leading up to their death. So yeah, there are some indicators there. We just need to, again, know the warning signs and ask some of the key questions. Individuals who are suicidal are fully intent on dying. Well, no, they want this thing called psychological pain to end. And I'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute. People perceive their issues as being so insurmountable that they have lost total control, and they feel very isolative, even in a crowd, because they've got all these issues, and they mask it. Very often will mask it in a way that people say, oh, he was so happy, or she was so happy beforehand. All right, some other myths. Anyone who is suicidal is crazy or mentally ill. Not true. Fiction. So while mental illness, mental health diagnosis are generally associated with high rates of suicide, when we do psychological autopsy studies, what we found is that more than 90% have died by suicide, had more than one mental disorder, but there are groups that are more at risk than others. Individuals who die by suicide tend not to have a diagnosable mental illness. Sometimes it's a permanent solution to a set of temporary problems. You probably have all heard that cliche before. Okay, the risk of suicide remains even when there's improvement following the crisis. And what's important to understand here is, yeah, people grow, people change. They see some hope when we provide some counseling, but the risk is always there, because once it becomes an option on the bookshelf that somebody can pull down, it's always an option. Many of us struggle through life with life's issues and never even contemplate the issue of taking our life as a result. But once it starts to enter your family or enter your thought process, it becomes an option. And I had a hard time wrapping my head around this particular issue at one point, especially when it comes to suicides in families. Um, uh, when somebody has died by suicide in a family, the risk for the rest of the family member goes up exponentially. And so I had talked to a mother who lost her teenage daughter to suicide, and I needed some help understanding that. And she told me it was, you know, it's an option in the family, and it boiled down to, you know, if it's good enough for Uncle Bob, why isn't it good enough for me? Kind of option. And so it's kind of a bit of interesting insight. So suicidal feelings and depression last and won't go away. Well, this is fiction. These feelings do go away, especially when people start to talk about the situation. Feelings of hopelessness are found to be one of the predictive factors in some of the treatment and work with individuals. But if you can find somebody who is willing to listen, open up, and talk frankly about these given issues, they tend to fade away over time. All right. And there's a suicidal personality or type. And basically what I'm getting at here is this is an issue that cuts across all age groups, all socioeconomic class, all educational levels. It impacts everybody. You can be married, you can be unmarried, you can be rich, you can be poor, happy, sad. It hits all of us. All right. So then we get some complex questions here. So what makes somebody become suicidal? Why did they take their life? What happened? You know, most people experience serious problems and will not become depressed, won't become hopeless, or turn to self-destructive behaviors. These questions are essentially difficult to answer. If I had the answer to these three questions, boy, it would be a huge moneymaker to go out and give that lecture and pass on those answers to many of us in the field of mental health. Suicide is a complex phenomenon. There is no one key thing that sparks everything off. It's many things, many issues that people are struggling with. So a complex phenomenon indeed. One of the biggest things, though, is what we find here is people who are suicidal want this intense psychological pain to end. They want it to stop. And how do you describe that intense psychological pain? You know, we can go to the doctor's office or go to the emergency room and our arm has been broken. All right. And we go, "Doc, my arm has been broken." And so the doctor says, "Well, let's find out." And we are able to take a picture of it. Click, click, right? We have an x-ray and the doctor looks at the x-ray and he can see the break in the arm. And he said, "Yep, there it is right there. There's a reason for your pain. We can fix this." And what ends up happening? Well, you get it wrapped up in a bandage, you get a cast on there. And nowadays, you know, that cast comes in various colors, right? It's not just the creamy white or the white. You can get it in blue, green, fuchsia, polka dot, you know. And then we parade that sucker around, you know, and say, "Hey, look, I took out 6 ninjas. Hey, look, I did the black diamond slope on the ski slope, and I actually just started skiing." You know, we parade that around almost like a badge of honor, and we talk about it, and people sign it, you know, and put their well wishes on there, or draw little things on that. But somebody who's experiencing intense psychological pain, nobody's going up and pointing to their forehead saying, "Please sign here, I'm feeling depressed. Please sign here, I'm hearing 7 voices." So this intense pain that they're experiencing is far different from the, oh, I'm feeling sad today or blue. And that's one of the issues. The word depression has come into our popular language to mean we're feeling kind of blue or kind of blah. But when there's a clinical depression, there's some serious issues there. And so it confuses matters. And people think, well, just, take a shower, feel better. Pick yourself up by your bootstraps and carry on, snap out of it kind of thing. And it's not that easy. The experience is so intolerable for the individual who's having psychological pain. They've tapped out all their resources, and the more they try to reach out to people at first with well intentions, these statements are made. Oh, well, God can't give you anything you can't handle. Oh, it could be worse. Those statements are well intended. However, they're very painful for somebody who's experiencing psychological pain because they can't see themselves overcoming it, the strong psychological pain they're experiencing. And they're hearing people, well, get over it, or come on, you'll snap out of it. It'll be gone in a few days. And it doesn't go away. It becomes even more difficult to talk about it with individuals. So they've tapped all their resources, and people in crisis often get tunnel vision. And unfortunately, if you get tunnel vision and the tunnel, at the end of that tunnel, you're targeting or looking at suicide as a viable option, well, then it becomes the viable option. There's feelings of hopelessness and helplessness. Those are pretty key indicators. Bullying. I talk about bullying here because, the bullying of today is much more malicious and hurtful and mean than it used to be when I was growing up. We're heavy into our social media. Technology is a wonderful thing, but it can also be used for nefarious means or acts, because people can just type things in there and it's just, it's words on a screen, but they're very painful. And especially for our young people where it's like, well, just put that stuff down. That is their life. That is how they communicate. It's very different. I've seen teenagers sitting in a room together, chatting with each other via text rather than verbally communicating. And that speaks to a whole bunch of social issues that we have to take a look at as a society and kind of help folks through and work out. So it's a complex issue. It's a complex issue. We see somewhat of a progression in people who have contemplated suicide. There are those that have thoughts. It's estimated that about 18% of the population has considered taking their life at one time or another, and that's a general statistic. But the thoughts are there. They think about it. There's no plan. There's no intent at this point. It's just, Then there's verbalization, when somebody starts talking about it. And quite honestly, I much rather have somebody talking to me about their particular issue than rather just keeping it close to their chest and not opening up and just having those thoughts repetitively playing in their head. So verbalization, when they start talking about this issue, let's have that dialogue as in a matter-of-fact way. This is where talking with somebody who's verbalizing these issues is extremely important. Get their thought process, what's going on, what's happening. Intent and plan. So from a clinical perspective, this is also extremely important because there's lots of confusions around folks that, well, they're doing it just for attention. Well, that could be, but we don't know what somebody's intentions are until we have that dialogue. And when we get folks who have that are intent on dying here or wanting to end their life, we're looking at some serious issues. They've created a plan. They've thought this through very carefully. And many folks who have contemplated taking their life do think of some very detailed plans. And then, of course, we have the attempts, individuals who start to act on all the above. They have laid out the groundwork, and then they start either practicing for their death by suicide. And very often when I give this talk to law enforcement, I ask them to take a look at a couple of things. First of all, if you get called out to a house where there was a misfire or an accidental discharge of a weapon, you got to ask yourself some questions around that, especially when it comes to the issue of suicide. It could be somebody practicing for their own death. The other thing I have officers take a look at are single vehicle accidents, because that could also be somebody's practice at an attempt to take their life. Not the case in all these situations, but you got to ask some of these questions and be aware. So being aware, well, if you go out there and you Google warning signs for suicide, you're going to get lists upon lists upon lists. And so, you know, many of those things, if you put them all together, it gets down to the point where you're almost feeling like, oh my God, I'm alive and breathing. That must mean I'm suicidal. Well, it's not the case. It's just, again, it speaks to the complexity of the phenomenon that is suicide. There are many issues here. So what happened several years back, a little over a decade now, I believe, the American Association of Suicidologists, there was a group of people out there that studied the phenomenon of suicide for its prevention and raising awareness. The American Association of Suicidologists held a congress in Wellesley, Massachusetts, and looked at all these lists and said, we've got to help people narrow down to some key indicators here, some key warning signs. And so here they are. If you can remember, is path warm? Is path warm? All right. This will help you kind of have that discussion a little bit more. Now, I want to warn you that one of these indicators all by itself does not necessarily mean somebody is suicidal, but when you start to see them, you know, coming together, clustering together, that's when you really want to definitely have some dialogue or discussion. So let's talk about the first one being ideation. All right. The ideation, nice fancy term for, you know, somebody who is thinking about suicide. Thoughts, they're having those thoughts. Then substance abuse. Substance abuse. Is there substance abuse involved in this process? Because often it reduces the inhibition for somebody to take their life. So there have been many studies on the effects of substance abuse to people's behavior. One of the ones that I like to share with people is, you know, even with aggression, the study was done where passive people, by nature, they're not aggressive. So you liquor them up, though, they become 10 times more aggressive. So, you know, so I like to say that, you know, people are 10 times more likely to be act on things that they would not normally act on. P, purposefulness. Purposefulness. Do they have some purpose in their life, some meaning, something of value? So when I'm talking with somebody, I'm looking for that reason for living, that sense of purpose. And sometimes it's a very, very fine nugget. It could be something very small. I'll help make that blossom a little bit more, you know, in talking with somebody. Anxiety. We're talking about sometimes an agitated state. You worry about lots of things. It's excessive worry. Sometimes it's irrational worry. People who have extreme anxiety have difficulty sleeping. Just think about things in your life where you were trying to worry about or had something you were worried about. You didn't sleep very well. It was constantly on your mind. And so this is their tumbling around for individuals, right? Trapped. They feel like there is no way out. There's no no end to any of this. They're backed into a corner, right? Hopelessness or helplessness, you know, hopelessness, they see their problems as being so insurmountable. It's the Mount Everest of problems. They've got a pile so high, they'll never get to the summit. And you know what? In reality, people do. They get to the top. But sometimes it takes somebody guiding them through that process. And it doesn't all happen in an hour or even in a couple of days. It takes a little bit of work. And like I said, sometimes it takes a guide or for somebody to get there. Withdrawal. Now, I'm not talking about withdrawal from the substance abuse that I had mentioned earlier. What we're talking about here is withdrawal from those things you used to like to do, right? Or that the person used to like to do. They withdraw from friends, from family, from society as a whole. They start to create this isolation bubble. And it's been even more challenging during a pandemic where we're telling people to isolate socially, where really, you know, we want to, you know, reach out to people, whether it be through Zoom technology or telephone, good old-fashioned telephone call, you know, texting, just to let people know they're thinking about them, that they're out there, you know, keeping folks engaged. And then anger. We're talking uncontrollable rage, and it can be like, oh, I'm going to get back at that person, or it's like, oh, I'm so stupid. So I'm talking about anger that is inward and outward, not just not just something you see outwardly, but it's something that is impacting that person inwardly, and it can be detrimental for that individual, right? Recklessness. Now, I'm not talking, I've got friends who like to skydive and do extreme sports. While that may seem reckless for a lot of us, that's not the type of recklessness I'm talking about. This is risk-taking behavior where they have no thought in that process, no thought of their own safety or well-being as they engage in the activity. You know, it's like one of the examples I use is playing chicken with the cars on I-4. You know, that's not something you would want to do. It's very risky behavior. All right. And mood changes. And I'm talking drastic mood change here. We all go through mood changes, and it's part of our, you know, circadian rhythm. As we go through a day, our mood may be uplifted, and maybe down a little bit, it comes up again. You know, our energy is low, our energy is high. What I'm talking about is a drastic mood change. So for example, you've got somebody in your office or that you know that you say good morning to every day, and they just go, ah, good morning, what's so good about it? And they do that for 364 days out of the year. And that's kind of the answer you expect. And then one day you would say, hey, good morning. And then, yeah, it is a good morning. That's a drastic change in mood and presentation. So that should make you stop and pause. What happened? And that's really what you want to do, is you want to start asking that question. What happened? What's different? Okay. So those are some of the key warning signs. All right. Now, a word of caution with regard to warning signs. You know, understand it is possible for somebody to be suicidal without any exhibition of the behaviors or showing any signs that may be associated with depression or suicidality. It happens. It's a small percentage, thank goodness, but you know, it can happen. It can be a very impulsive act. All right. So I've got the warning signs. I have some understanding about it. And folks who give you some warning, sometimes they'll be very direct. I wish I were dead. I'm going to go kill myself. I'm going to end it all. I'm done with this. These are things that are pretty pretty direct, pretty clear. Ask some questions around that. The grouping that is a little bit more concerning are the vague statements. You know, we all have to say goodbye. You know, you don't have to worry about that anymore, or you won't have to worry about me anymore. You know, these are vague statements. What does somebody mean by that? You know, what's going on? So as you look at some of these statements, you know, ask yourself some questions, or ask the individual some questions out loud. What's going on? There are other major risk factors as well. If somebody is isolative, or they're alone, what we found is that is a major red flag. Being a Caucasian male is pretty big red flag. Adolescents, because they're impulsive in a lot of thought processes and in their behaviors. And then we have 60 or higher. One of the highest groups for rates of suicide are Caucasian males, 65 and older, and it actually goes up even more so when you hit 80s. If there's substance abuse involved, there's been some recent losses, and whether it be death, loss of job, loss of a relationship, loss of something significant in that person's life, and issues surrounding unemployment and financial difficulties. These are red flags we look for when, as a clinician, when doing assessments and trying to figure out. So why do people not talk about the issue of suicide? Well, there's this huge stigma. First and foremost, it's shameful and sinful. So I feel there's guilt, and I don't want anybody to know my thoughts, so I'm not going to share. People view folks who have suicidal thinking as weak, selfish, manipulative, that it may be contagious. People don't want to be perceived as crazy, C-R-A-Z-Y, you know. There's a lot of fear of what might happen if I start sharing my thoughts. They'll lock me away forever. I don't want to be locked away forever. There's contempt or anger towards that person. How dare you? And aversion. People just don't want to talk about the issue because it's an uncomfortable topic to talk about. It shouldn't be. It should be something we're having discussion on a regular basis with folks we think might have an issue. So I mentioned Durkheim's study, and he talked about the issue of suicide and isolation and that whole piece. What's important here is how do we build on those protective factors to help reduce suicide? How do we prevent somebody's death by suicide? Well, we can build on some of these conditions that we refer to as protective factors. And these are conditions and resources that build on resources and build on one's resiliency. And resiliency here is the ability to readily recover and adapt to adversity. How flexible are we, and can we do it? When we're being bombarded left and right with all these issues, these barriers, these concerns, how do we adapt? How flexible can we be? And what are the tools at our disposal? It can be argued that, you know, enhancing these protective factors actually can reduce the risk of suicide. And based on studies, we find that folks that have these protective factors in place have a lower rate of suicide. So what are these things? Well, learning skills on how to problem solve, how to work through an issue. Do they have some impulse issues? How do we get that under control? Learning to delay gratification, delaying acts, thinking it through a little bit more. There's some things that we talk about in treatment through a mindful process, taking a moment. There's a method called STOP, where you actually stop, think about what you're about to do, think about that thought process, observe how it's impacting you, and then you proceed if you need to do so. So taking that moment to think through and control some of your impulses. Look at some conflict resolution. How do we handle disputes in a nonviolent manner? That it's, and again, the violence doesn't necessarily need to be outward, it's inward as well. What family members are out there? Where are those community supports? Individuals who have a desire to die by suicide. In one study by Dr. Thomas Joyner, he theorized that there's two groups of people, those that desire to die and those that are capable. And when those two worlds collide, that's the highest risk group. When you've got those people who desire to die, they have what's referred to as perceived burdensomeness. Perceived burdensomeness. So very often, family members, friends would support the person, but the person has this perception that, oh, I don't want to be a burden to somebody. I don't want them worrying about me. They've got their own issues. And, family members will rise to the challenge. Friends will rise to the challenge. Community resources are out there. They're there to help those individuals open up and talk about it, especially if people are uncomfortable speaking with close loved ones. Okay, restricting access to high lethal methods of suicide. I mean, that almost goes without saying. You remove, firearms if you can and have the ability to do so. Clean up the medicine cabinets, make sure that they're not hoarding medicines or building a stockpile. Build on that person's sense of self. Give them some self-worth. Why are they important in people's lives? Have those discussions with those that you love. Why do they mean so much to you? And sometimes folks that are struggling with this, the anger will come at those that they feel most safe with, and therefore they will often start to push people away in the aggressive stance. For those of you who may be thinking of some folks in your life that may be dealing with that, hold fast, stay true. It's sometimes difficult. Stay true to your friendship, and it can be hard sometimes because the person can say some hurtful things. Look at cultural and religious beliefs that discourage suicide. We've had folks call on our crisis line who have contemplated taking their life, and more than once people have said, I'm never going to follow through on the act because my religion tells me it's a bad thing, which is a great nugget for me to work on, because then I can say, well, tell me more about what your religion says. That is obviously something of value to that person, so I want to hear more about it. I want to instill that belief system and encourage them to continue to follow those support systems, to continue to follow and reach out to faith-based if that works well for you. It doesn't work well for everybody, and sometimes folks in the state become very they have a crisis of faith as well, and so it's a struggle for them through this process. So we encourage folks to look out that. So with our young people, with it being the second highest means of death for our young people, I want to encourage people to look at building on emotional development and strengthening resiliency in our youth. Get out there and reinforce that person's strengths and accomplishments. Give them the attaboys, encourage them to explore, and when they fall down, be there to help them pick them up. Don't just say, "See, told you so." Be that support. Be that support. They do need to be responsible for their actions, and we can encourage that and accept some of the consequences of their decision making in that process. So they own this. They own the good with the bad. It's much easier for us to own the good stuff. It's much more difficult to own the bad stuff. With our young people, they put a lot of internal pressure on them to perform, and do well in school. And yeah, that's important, but it shouldn't be the only thing highlighted in their life. Mistakes, we learn from our mistakes. So striving for perfection, it's a goal, but it's not, that does not have to be, you have to get all A's, you have to do all that. So much pressure is put on our young people to perform in school that they very often have unnecessary tension as a result. So help young people learn and make friends, keep friends, encouraging them, and being part of a gamer community. I'm a gamer, so what that means is I play various video games. Many of those games are social in nature, believe it or not, as they're out there going pew 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 and fighting the bad guys, or playing against each other in basketball or football kind of things. There's a social portion to that. So just because they're home playing games doesn't necessarily mean they're not being social. It's a different kind of socialization. But we do want to encourage our young people to get out there and, make those social connections where it's appropriate, where it's safe, especially now during a pandemic. It's kind of an extra challenge to make those things happen. But we want to get out there and teach them courtesy, considerateness, friendliness. These are some of the things that tend to be missed when we start just doing things through social media, because we can be very brave when we're hiding behind our gamer tags or our names that we put on the internet and stuff like this. But and that's again why I think bullying is much more malicious now than it ever was, because of the social media aspect. But we got to help them learn empathy through this process, and it builds character traits in individuals. Encourage them to make plans, to work something out systematically when they come up against a problem. Again, building on that decision-making process and impulsiveness. Encourage folks to deal with their emotions in a positive way. Anger is a good emotion. It's the behaviors often associated with anger that is not good. All right. So if something upsets you, how do we express that in an appropriate manner that isn't going to be hurtful for anybody? Encourage people to understand how their feelings impact others, and how it impacts their behavior, their actions, and then be a good role model. Watch your own behavior. There's this saying out there that, hey, do as I say, not as I do. Well, your actions actually speak far more voluminous than the words you use. Your actions are what our young people are watching, especially if you have very young people in your life. They don't have the language for their behavior. They don't necessarily know how to act in a particular situation. So they're looking for the caregiver or the adult in their life that they look up to and how they behave in those situations. So it's pretty important to, we have to model the behavior in ourselves that we want to see in our young people. So building those resiliencies, in our young people can help prevent some of these things. So let's get more direct. So now you've got somebody in front of you who is, you've picked up on some warning signs. You're kind of concerned. What do I do? What do I do? Well, I'm going to give you a little mnemonic device here. If you can remember, aid life. Aid life. This is where it begins. Because we're going to get into some community resources out there in a minute, but you're there in the front lines. You've got somebody in front of you, and those spidey senses are tingling. kick in aid life. So aid life. First, ask. Ask. The most important thing is ask the question, are you going to kill yourself? Don't dance around it. I sort of thinking maybe you might want to hurt yourself. No. Are you going to kill yourself? If you feel this person is contemplating wanting to take their life, ask the question straight out. Ask in a matter-of-fact way. Don't be judgmental and confrontational. Just ask. And now you're going to get a couple of answers. You're going to get a yes, in which case, okay, let's talk about this some more. Let's get you the help you need, and work together with that individual to make that happen. Then the other two are a little more complicated. You might get the, no, what do you think? I'm crazy. I don't understand. What are you talking about? Oh, why would you think I would even be? Obviously, there was something you were picking up on, so it's an opportunity to have that dialogue of what raised your concern with that person that you care about so much. And, you let that person know, I care about you, and that's why I'm asking this question. I'm worried you've had some recent losses lately, you're struggling with some things, and all right, maybe they weren't contemplating, but at least you asked the question and you know for certain. The third answer is a little more complicated. It's when you ask the question, there's this long pause. And for me, that's an uncomfortable place. And I would state that, I'm not convinced, because you had to think that through very carefully, what's going on. And again, have a dialogue. Have a dialogue. Do something immediately. Intervene immediately. Right? Don't say, well, it's the weekend. We can get together on Monday. We'll talk about it then. No. Everything stops at this point. Your loved one, your friend, whomever it may be, their life is the most important thing right then and there. Boom. Everything stops. You want to start to do some immediate intervention at this point, which leads to the D in aid, which means don't keep it a secret. The person's going to say, please don't tell anybody. I don't want anybody else to know. I trust you so much. Just please keep it a secret. I'm thinking of that person. That's a lot to put on one other person. So you want to let that person know, whoa. Look, I'm not going to go around and shout it from the highest rooftop that, oh my God, you're thinking of taking your life. You're contemplating suicide. But I am going to stay with you, and we are going to get some other people involved, because this is bigger than both of us. And listen to what I'm saying. We are going to get the help. We are going to get the support. The we is important here. You've got to partner with this person, be that guide, be that helping hand to get them connected to the resources, which brings me to the L in this. Locate the help, whether it be somebody in the school system, law enforcement, medical provider, the clergy, wherever, through a crisis line, whatever. Locate the help. Know what's happening. The I has to do with inform a trusted friend. All right. Find somebody that you know that can work with you as part of this process, and help you through it. Inform a trusted friend. When I say get out there and involve the clergy, please understand there are some clergy that take this opportunity to beat somebody over the head with the Bible. That's not the time to be doing this. This is the time where, if they are having a crisis of faith, to really kind of listen and guide them through that process. Trust those people that know who you trust and can go to help with very, very sensitive issues, right? Find someone, if you have to leave that person, to go get the help, or to have somebody stay with them. Do not ever leave the person alone. Just stay with them, listen through it. And you want to expedite the help. Again, right away. It goes back to the I. We end it with the E. And expedite. Get help right away. Don't say, well, do you think you'll be all right for the next couple of days? We can then go get help. And it's, there are a number of hotlines out there that can help you. So aid life, if you can remember those, these are the tools that can help you prevent somebody from taking their life. All right. it's an opportunity to take some of these warning signs, put it into some action through Aid Life, and get people the help that they need. Don't ever think you need to do it alone. It's a hard task to work with somebody who is contemplating taking their life. So get other people involved. It's important. So what are some of the resources out there? Well, more locally, we've got Peace River Center's mobile crisis response team. Our team is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's just a phone call away. All you need to do is call our crisis line number, 519-3744, or use our 800 number, 800-627-5906. That's locally. You'll get somebody on the phone 24/7. They can talk to you over the phone, or somebody can go out and see you. That's the beauty of our mobile crisis response team. The crisis does not need to come to us. We can go to it, and we go anywhere in the community and can talk with anybody wherever about their particular issues. Now, if you're uncomfortable with the local number, down here in the corner is the national hotline. That's the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. Those counselors they're actually located in New York State, and so if people just want to use that, they can as well. Very often they will deploy or reach out to the local provider to have them follow up with something in particular. So those are the key numbers and some of the resources I have for you with regard to suicide awareness. Hopefully this talk has been useful for you and helpful in understanding that, you know, it's a serious issue that anybody can start to address through understanding what some of the warning signs are and taking some action through Aid Life. So I guess at this point I can open it up for any questions that were out there that popped up while I was giving a little talk. Anything out there, Jessica, Carly?
I'm not seeing any questions. I think you were pretty thorough.
All right.
We do have one that looks like just came in.
Okay.
Does all of this information also pertain to military vets? Is there a military specific course, class, or information? Some military vets are reluctant to speak with military counselors as well as non-military counselors, theory of lack of understanding. As a family member, I need to help someone who has already a plan and intent.
Okay. Yeah, you know, with the military, because I work with law enforcement as well as some folks in the military, that there's this very close connectedness and sense of community that they have. And even, you know, she's correct. Folks are reluctant, vets are even reluctant to talk to counselors in the VA. They're often looking for, you know, a brother or a sister who've been in theater and had that experience and can talk more openly about that that experience and relate a little bit more. There are support groups out there through the VA and their crisis line. I do know that there are some peers who answer that. I've worked with several of those individuals who they're not just another counselor, they're somebody who's been there, done that as well. So I do encourage them to at least use the crisis line through the vet, not necessarily our crisis line, but the veterans crisis line at the very least. There are groups out there. I don't know of where there are off the top of my head, but there are groups specific for veterans. Keep up the good fight, keep asking the questions. They tend to hold a lot back because of some of the experiences that they've had. They don't want to traumatize loved ones on top of that, not only because they won't understand. Now, some of that, to be honest with you, some of that is, you know, a way of pushing back and saying, I don't need the help. No one's going to understand my particular issue. Not all of it is that, but you know, there is some of that. So it's you know, it's take this information. It can be applied to even folks in the military. They've got additional experiences and layers of trauma on top of that need to be addressed.
You know,
thanks for that question, by the way. That was a good question.
Yeah, I'll speak. This is Jessica Lawson with Community Relations. So my boyfriend is a 20-year veteran. He was in the Army, and I know he has had some of his younger, the guys that he served with, one in particular reached out to him, and he said, you know, he expressed that he was having some of the feelings like you mentioned. So my boyfriend invited him up to go fishing, and they just talked. And, you know, because it was another vet, he felt like he was able to really be able to share and not share with someone who might mark it on his record as like, oh, red flag, you know, can't send him back into combat, you know. So
right.
I think that that's an important thing too, is if you can encourage them to really find a trusted friend. You know, part of that list was like the trusted friend, like someone that they can open up with that will not just push it under the rug, or, you know, that will really be able to connect them with resources. But I put in the chat, Kirk, that if we can locate those groups, we can send them with the follow-up email, so we can include some additional specific resources. And then you're always welcome to email. I'll put the email up there, communityrelations@peacerivercenter.org, and we can try to find you specific. We have lots of counselors who deal in trauma, and I know that's a big deal. My boyfriend has night, you know, jolts where he will wake up, and I've mentioned to him probably 100,000 times about EMDR, which is a great resource for anyone who's experienced trauma. And he hasn't gotten it yet, but, you know, sometimes you have to plant the seed and keep watering it.
Right.
So that's another thing I'd like to mention is, you know, we do have therapists in our organization that specialize in trauma. So keep that as a resource as well. Any other questions? Carla, you don't see any either, right? I think that is it for our questions. All right, well, thank you so much, Kirk. Again, if anyone thinks of any other questions, please let us know. Let me type in real quick our email address here.
Okay. And while she's doing that, again, I want to say thank you to everybody who joined us and who's listening to this, even beyond the live version. Thank you for taking the time to raise your awareness on the issue of suicide. It's extremely important that we all get out there and educate ourselves on this particular issue so that we can address it. And, you know, this little act of raising your awareness and then being able to implement some of it helps to reduce rates of suicide across our country and around the world. So thank you all for taking the time to educate yourself on some of this stuff.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kirk. The other thing that I thought about mentioning is our mental health first aid. Obviously, with the pandemic, we've had to switch formatting a bit, and I think they just approved the first virtual training. But mental health first aid is another great tool that you can learn on how to really help someone who's walking through a substance use issue or a mental health issue. Kirk is trained in youth mental health first aid. Have you gotten your adult training yet?
Not yet.
The pandemic kind of messed with our plans, but
yeah, it sure did.
Quite a few instructors. So I will also include that in the follow-up email if you'd like more information. Mental health first aid does have specific sections that are for like first responders. I believe there's one for military as well.
There is.
So
yes, there is.
That's something that in the future we could even offer a very, unique facet of mental health and mental illness related to, PTSD and all of those things that our first responders and our veterans deal with. Well, on that note, thank you again, everyone, for joining. Let us know if you have any additional questions, and we will get the recording sent out to you.